Overthinkers of Reddit, what unlikely scenario actually came true that you were completely prepared for because you are an overthinker? I always carry a small sewing kit whenever I go to a wedding. I have sewed 2 brides into their dresses so far. I worked weddings for a while, during an age, 26 to 28, where lots of my friends were getting married. I've helped to bustle pretty much every bride whose wedding I attended, including brides who I didn't know well, who were either friends of my husband, or I was close friends with the groom. At work, I had one of those craft supply organizers full to the brim of emergency supplies, pins, safety, bobby, and straight pins, hair ties, earring backs, a sewing kit, pain relievers, Tums, granola bars. Sometimes you just need to get the bride to eat something. Chalk, works great for covering up minor stains on white dresses, hairspray, makeup remover wipes, super glue, band-aids, blister bandages, you name it. People were always pleasantly surprised when they needed something random, and I was just like, yep, I've got that, here you go. All the teachers at the middle school I taught at knew I was a pack rat, and one day a kid split his pants, and the school counselor came to me and said, "Mr. Theodore, would you happen to have a pair of sweats or gym pants in your truck?" Yep. So, the kid spent the rest of the day in a pair of nylon pants I had behind my seat. He is lucky, because if he didn't fit, he would have spent the rest of the day in a white disposable coverall I had in case I had car trouble and nice clothes. Icing on the cake, it was a student I really liked who was super helpful to other kids and teachers, so it was nice to do something nice for him. I also carried a Swiss Army brand soft side briefcase, yard sale find, stuffed, and it had a few of each size of battery. One day Phil Necro and 2 Braves players were there for an assembly and Phil's Mic battery was dying, so I sprinted upstairs to my classroom, grabbed a 9-volt from my bag, then basically rolled across the panel and switched out his battery, and got back to the PA avoiding getting on TV news cameras. Was at one of those trampoline parks with my kid when I look over and see several of the workers attending to an elderly lady sitting on the floor. Turns out she'd taken a shot to the forehead somehow, and was bleeding profusely. They were trying to help with paper towels. Well, I'd taken a free local stop the bleed class just in case, and since have kept supplies in my truck. Asked if they needed some gauze and a bandage, went and got it, and brought it back. I told the guy, now if one piece of gauze fills up, he interrupted, "Take it off, and put on a new one." I said, "No. You put another one over tops that one, but leave the bottom one there." He said, "Well, you know more than I do. Come over and help." We were able to get her patched up. I remember one day in school a teacher was complaining someone had tied her blinds so tightly she couldn't get them to open or close. Me being the weird kid, I asked her if she wanted a screwdriver to get it undone. She looked at me like I was crazy, and a little scared as I reached into my wallet and pulled out this tiny screwdriver from those tiny finger BMX skateboards, and handed it over. Everyone thought I was crazy, and my teacher laughed in relief when she saw it. Everyone thought I was weird until I told them I used it to tighten the screws on my glasses. They were constantly unscrewing themselves, and I was sick of having to go to the opticians every time it happened. Obviously, the solution was to carry a tiny screwdriver with me. Not me, but my mother. Apparently at a party, where my parents and their friends were playing board games, there was a realization that an Herglis was missing from one of the games they planned on playing. My mother proceeded to reach into her purse and pull out an Herglis she just so happened to bring, on the off chance they didn't have one. Not me, but my mother. Apparently at a party, where my parents and their friends were playing board games, there was a realization that an Herglis was missing from one of the games they planned on playing. My mother proceeded to reach into her purse and pull out an Herglis she just so happened to bring, on the off chance they didn't have one. When my son was still a baby, we had to take an 11-hour flight. As an overthinker, I brought at least 25 diapers for him to go through. He didn't need that many, but the mom sitting close to us was very grateful when she ran out of diapers, not even halfway through the flight, and I gave her a few. This was at 9 years old. We had driven home and seen the beginning wisps of smoke for the California Cedar fire in 2003. Naturally, I assumed the worst and packed up all my clothes and spent about an hour making a travel cage for my guinea pigs. I tied their water bottle to the side so they could drink, packed up their food and their favorite furniture just in case. I then spent the next few hours monitoring the fire on the news and out in the distance from our window, periodically asking my parents if we needed to evacuate. At some point in the night the fire sped up like crazy and was literally on the hillside across the street. I went into my parents' room and said, "The fire is across the street, are you sure we shouldn't evacuate?" At this point we all went crazy grabbing important documents and supplies, and as we were about to lock the doors and drive, I realized I forgot my guinea pigs. My parents told me it was too late and I didn't have time to grab them, but when I cried and explained I had them packed up, I was able to grab them and go. The house ended up okay thanks to a neighbor putting out embers before they took, but we were gone long enough my pigs wouldn't have made it. At this point we all went crazy grabbing important documents and supplies, and as we were about to lock the doors and drive, I realized I forgot my guinea pigs. My parents told me it was too late and I didn't have time to grab them, but when I cried and explained I had them packed up, I was able to grab them and go. The house ended up okay thanks to a neighbor putting out embers before they took, but we were gone long enough my pigs wouldn't have made it. I was supposed to get married at the end of May last year. At the beginning of the year, before any of the pandemic stuff happened, I became obsessed with thinking about all the things that could go wrong and how we would lose our money spent on the event. As a result, I purchased a very high coverage insurance policy for the event. As luck would have it, this type of insurance had no clause that prevented collecting if there was a pandemic. We got all of our money back. I bought and learned to use a Slim Jim, open locked cars. I carry one in my car, and have been able to help no less than 10 people who have locked their keys in their car. My brother was visiting me from out of town and he needs something from Target. He called me and said an elderly man had locked his keys in his car, and I was able to drive over and help. Also have jumper cables that have helped start a few stranded drivers. Not me overthinking, but one time when my girlfriend and I were going to the gym she packed me 2 spare shirts. I made a joke that it was unnecessary to bring 2 as it's not like I was going to explosively shit myself or something and ruin the spare shirt and need a second spare. We laughed it off, but brought 2 anyway. After changing from my sweat-soaked shirt to a spare upon walking home, a bird shits all down me, ruining the shirt I was wearing. I was so thankful she had brought an additional spare, so I now do not question the quantity of what she decides to bring anywhere. Went through a stage as a teenager where I thought I was psychic. I know, stupid. A friend asked me jokingly to make a prediction. I told him to get a flashlight because tomorrow would be dark. I grabbed one myself when I got home and put it in my purse. No idea why, just did it. The next day the Eastern Seaboard blackouts happened. He still asks for predictions to this day. Injuring my dominant hand. As a kid I had an irrational fear of having it chopped off. I spent all of grade 6 teaching myself to write and do things with my left hand. I made a conscious effort to remain as ambidextrous as possible. As an adult I broke a few fingers on my dominant hand, but it wasn't a big issue because I could do most things equally with my left hand. At last it was very funny. I am basically blind without my glasses, and I've always taken a backup pair of glasses when I travel. It went untouched for years, taking up valuable space in my luggage. Lo and behold, one trip to Montreal a few years ago I just woke up one morning to find my glasses broken, no idea how it happened. And I finally got a chance to break out my backup pair. What would I do if my neighbor's house caught on fire? I said I'd make sure my kids were safe and panic, and then we'd run if the fire got close. My neighbor's house caught on fire, and I sat outside and watched it with my kids and panicked. This is the most real response. We can overthink everything and lose sleep, whatever, but when reality strikes you are only reacting. Now you know how you actually react in that situation, and I'm sure you're now overthinking your next strategy, lol. When I had a tumor removed a couple years ago, I kept the surgical blue vomit bag thing they gave me just in case, in my car in case anyone ever got sick while I'm driving. Last winter I was on a 3rd date, driving on the highway back home with her, and she was feeling like she was going to throw up, could not find the blue vomit bag, felt dumb telling her where to look when it was in my center console all along. She ended up ralphing in a grocery bag that luckily didn't break. COVID. I worked at a medical uniform and supplies store years ago, and they were moving locations. They decided they weren't going to sell face masks anymore, and were going to throw boxes of them away. I asked if I could keep them, just in case. They've been moving with me for about 5 years, before I actually used the masks. I have a similar experience. I have just about everything you could possibly need to survive in the car, if it breaks down or something else happens. I was driving, and an old couple was crossing a driveway headed home after a nice lunch out. The lady biffed it on the curb. She had ripped quite a bit of her skin, and was bleeding all over the place. I saw them, pulled my car over, and was able to hop out, clean her up, and bandage everything up. It felt really good to be prepared, and help the frantic old couple. A couple years ago, I was taking classes at this tuition academy, when I stepped out for a cigarette. Back then, my family didn't know I smoked, so I was slightly apprehensive. There was a shop nearby, and I just took a quick look at some cars parked nearby. I even internally chided myself for being so paranoid. Imagine my surprise when I saw my mom's car. I then saw my mom with my younger brother at a shop nearby, buying some stuff. To my knowledge, that was the only time she ever visited that particular shop, and it was at the exact moment when I decided to smoke a cig. My anxiety bailed me out for once, although my mom did find out about the smoking later. The pandemic. I had been watching the news, and knew there was a virus spreading that was freaking officials out way more than normal. The day they announced a case in my county, I made a trip to the store to stock up on the essentials like booze, food, and TPE. The lines were moderate, but not at panic levels. A week later they announced the lockdown. Thankfully I had bought enough to last me 2.5 months without needing to leave my place. Checking if the gas was open in a stove. Every night I would check in the kitchen, if the knobs were in place. They would be. One night my brother cooked, he forgot, and before I went to bed, I checked and closed it. Snacks. I've never been somewhere, and regretted how many snacks or drinks I brought. I went to a match once with my husband and sister who both joked about me bringing too much stuff. They had eaten it all. Before we were halfway through, a pack of fruit snacks can save the day.